Hello, in today's video for the Cadillac 472-500, I'm going to show how to put the hub on. Now, this is the Make It Run motor. I've put on the head, torqued all the rocker arms back into place. I've put on a G pump because that fits the chassis better. I have Loctited and torqued the camshaft bolts. I have Loctited and torqued the flywheel bolts, so all that's in place. Now I'm going to run a split cover, so I only have the bottom half of the cover, plus that'll let me do a couple other videos to show you guys some things. But this has a new seal. I've oiled the seal. The oil slinger is in place. Now don't forget the oil slinger. You need to have that in place in order to help prevent too much oil from coming out the seal. It's designed to throw the oil away from the seal, and it tosses it up onto the fuel pump eccentric and the gear for the distributor. So it's an important piece. It needs to be in there. Now, I know in one of the videos that we did with Richard Holdner, Courtney just grabbed a lead hammer and drove the hub on. And that's not technically the right way. We were kind of joking around, and it can be done, but it's a little rough on some of the bearings. But the proper way to install it is with a harmonic balancer installer. Now, that's the reason the thread is in the end of the crankshaft, is to fit this tool. Now, remember that thread is 9/16, and 9/16 fine thread. And so you need an adapter that will go to that thread. Now, there are harmonic balancer installers for like Chevy, and they may have an integral adapter on the end. It's actually part of the tool. Maybe even one on both ends. But that's going to be like small block Chevy, big block Chevy, or small block Chevy LS. And 9/16 is a little different thread. So you need to buy a set or borrow a set from maybe the tool rental at one of the auto parts stores. But make sure it has the 9/16 adapter in it. Now, there are different versions of this. This one's actually a bit of a pain, but I've had it for years. The adapter just threads into the end of this particular tool. Now, there are ones that have through bolts, and that threads into the adapter. Those are actually a little bit easier because you can kind of tighten the adapter onto the tool. In this case, I'm going to have to assemble it and then put the hub on to make sure it's sitting right. Now, you want the thread fully engaged onto the crankshaft, but you don't want this tool to bottom out. Now, I've got the thread pretty well all the way in. This part is going to go on to the tool itself, and basically this is just an adapter, but you don't want to bottom out this assembly. If it bottoms out, you will break it right here where the thread ends on the crankshaft part of the thread. It's not designed to deal with the force of rotation with it butting up against the end of the crankshaft. So you got to make sure that you are not bottomed out. And that's the first big thing to concern yourself with. Now in this case, I've got all the threads engaged. You know, I've got probably a good 3-4 threads in there. And so I'm ready for the hub. Now I have, like I said, I've oiled the seal so it's not starting dry. I have put a little bit of motor oil on the inside of the hub itself just to help the press. And I've also put a little assembly lube on the main threads here so they don't gall. That's kind of important because if these start binding up, the whole tool's going to want to turn. So the next step is to put the hub on. Now remember, there's a keyway, and the key is towards the back of the crankshaft. So when you first put this on, you need to feel it and find that the keyway is engaged and that the hub's basically in its starting position. Now, once you do that, there is usually, and sometimes the kits come with multiple washers, but there is usually a washer sometimes thicker than this, to go against the hub. And then you've got a bearing that goes against the washer. Now the purpose of the bearing is to allow the nut to rotate, because you've got a nut that goes on, and that's what's actually going to apply the force to the hub itself to move it back. You know, threads are basically an inclined plane, and so that gives you some force. Now, like I said, this one is a bit of a pain because I've got to thread the nut all the way down. And if you look here, there's actually a flat on the end of this tool in order to hold it from rotating. And so, I can get this started. So once you get the nut down to where you're actually tightening on the hub, which is going to take me a minute with this tool, you can, let's see if I can get it started. You're going to actually start applying some real force in order to get the hub on. Now I recommend you do this without the oil pan in place, because the hub is what holds that oil slinger in place. And if you don't get this all the way back, then that oil slinger can flop around in there and just tear stuff up, and you don't want that. You got to make sure that you're all the way back. Now, usually if you're using the hub like I am here, this is the one that's been on the motor, there's a little ring on the seal area that shows where the seal was. And you can use that to gauge how far back you are and whether or not you're all the way there. And then once you really get close, you can reach underneath without the pan on and see if you've actually got the oil slinger all the way tight to where it's not moving around. So I'm almost there. There we go. Okay, so now we're down snug. So, like I said, with a wrench on the flat on the end, the only goal of this hand is to make sure this tool does not turn. Because as you apply force, sometimes the threads will stick a little bit, and it's going to want to turn the tool. And so you need to make sure that doesn't happen, because you don't want to break that end off. And so you hold it here, and then you start applying force to get the hub to go on. And it should go on fairly smooth. If for some reason it binds up, you might have to look at it and see where you're at, or have your puller available so that you might have to pull the hub off and do it again. Now you can see this is basically walking right on. You know, I am applying force, but I'm not having to do an excessive amount of force. And some of that's because the bearing is allowing it to rotate. Some of it's because I oiled everything up. Now, you just keep going. And like I said, I'm kind of looking. I'm not even close yet to the thing. And the slinger is still loose. I can see I've got at least a ½ inch to go here. So it's going to get tighter as you go, but it shouldn't be too bad. Like I said, if you're getting to the point where you're really feeling like you're applying way too much power, you might want to back off and see if you can figure out. And like I said, if it starts trying to turn the tool, you can't hold it, well, that's usually because the threads here are trying to gall on the tool. Now, if you borrowed a tool, it may be a little messed up because people don't know how they work. So take a good look at it before you borrow one. And if it's a new tool, like I said, make sure you put some good lube on it. And in this case, I used assembly lube. Now, at this point, the seal is on the seal surface area, but I can still see the line. I'm still a good solid ½ inch from where I want to be. And so I just keep going, and I keep holding it here in order to make sure it goes all the way on. Oh, see? Now, once you get close, it's going to take it out of your hand. See, I'm down tight. Now looking at the seal surface, I'm actually a bit back, but the slinger is tight. So I should be pretty tight. Now, sometimes when you buy replacement seals, because they cut that line in the hub itself, they will slightly offset the new seal a little bit so it's working on a clean surface. Now, if you notice, like I said, it was taking it out of my hand. This is literally as tight as it wants to go. And the slinger is tight. I cannot move the slinger at all. So that's all good indications that I'm where I want to be. So at this point, you hold the tool the opposite direction and you loosen the nut off. And that lets you take the tool off of the hub. Now, when you get there, I may lose the adapter on this one because of how it works, but it might come with me. Okay, so that's the tool out of the way. So the adapter should just unscrew. There's no force on it at all. And if you look here, you know, you should be fairly close to where you're at. And like I said, the best thing to really go by is the oil slinger itself, because if it's in there tight, then you know you're all the way back. And once you get there, I usually recommend, now factory just had a cork in here, but it's not a bad idea to put a bolt. And again, this is just a 9/16 fine thread grade 8 bolt and a very thick washer. Now, if you have trouble finding that, this part here is like 2 inches diameter, and that's what this washer is. If you have trouble finding that, Cadco does have them on hand and makes the washer special. I bought this one off of eBay just as an industrial washer that was 9/16 on the inside and 2 inch on the outside. Now, once you get this on, 9/16 thread is able to go like 160 foot-pounds or something, but this bolt doesn't need to be that tight. Just go down like 50 or 60 pounds. All you're trying to do is help ensure that the hub won't come off. Now, if it's only been off once in the last 45 years, and it's only going back on the one time, it's still going to have plenty of press. But as you take these on and off and on and off and on and off, they start losing their press, and then the bolt is a good idea to help ensure that it stays put. Now, in this case, this motor had been together, but I have now had this hub on. This is the 3rd time. And so I really need to probably run a washer and a bolt in order to make sure that I have this ready to go. The other nice thing about having a bolt in there is if you really have to kind of roll the motor for later on, you can do that. Now, if you want, you can go to a little bit longer bolt and put a nut in there. And if you torque the nut down while holding the bolt, that will lock it in place where you can back up too. And that's what I was doing earlier when it was on the run stand. If you looked, I had a longer bolt in there and a nut so that I could adjust the valves and fuss with stuff. So, like I said, it's not a bad idea to have it in there at this point. And even a regular bolt, I mean, if you go backwards, you may wind up with the bolt loosening. You know, if it's torqued to 60 pounds, it might stay put. But you can certainly keep going forward and rotate the motor in order to line up timing marks, get the distributor in, you know, check a valve, you know, check push rods, look for loose rocker arms. So it's not a bad thing to have in there. So that's putting on the hub. This one's now in place. I can put the harmonic balancer on this one back on, and then the pulley, and get all that lined up. In the next video, I'll probably show getting the distributor in and talk about some of that. But that's it for this particular video, and it's really not that hard with the right tool. Just make sure you're using the right tool and that that tool does not rotate and break off the end of the adapter. I mean, if you do that, the adapter will probably come right out because it's really about the pulling stress on the tool, not that it bound up in the hole. And so that's the good news. But I have quit loaning out these tools to other people because every time I got it back, it was broken because they weren't paying attention to how it goes. So that's how it goes. You know, like I said, it has a flat, it has a bearing. Make sure you use a little bit of oil, and it should go on just as smooth as this one did. And that's all there is to it. So good luck on your projects. I'm going to finish working on this. I got to get the rest of the stuff together and get the oil pan on it, and we'll see if we can't get this back on the run stand and running and see how our cam does. So anyway, I wish you luck. That's it for this video.